As in many parts of the world, Merlot in California, I think, is misunderstood. This is a grape that wasn't really identified as being a standalone variety until the late 70s and early 80s when wineries like Duckhorn and Clos du Bois helped put it on the map. Merlot in California is probably going to be found in other areas where you find Cabernet Sauvignon. They're directly related, and usually where you have one, you have the other. The difference with Merlot is that it does better in cooler climates, whereas Cabernet Sauvignon becomes herbal, herbaceous, green, and stocky if the climate is too cool. Merlot actually enjoys that cooler climate, and it brings out an interesting sort of bay leaf, menthol, minty character that is part of the wine's DNA. What's interesting about Merlot in California to me right now is in how it's interpreted. So, as I mentioned earlier, you can have it as a pure play grape. What Merlot brings to the table is generally a plushness, a smoothness, a roundness, and a softness of tannin that those other grape varieties don't. They can add a little backbone in and a little bit of other flavor. Merlot, too, is often used in California, as originally was planned, as it is in many parts of the world, as a blending grape. So if your Cabernet Sauvignon is hard, if your Cabernet Sauvignon is austere or it's tannic, and you want to soften out the edges a little bit, polish it off, adding a little bit of Merlot into the mix will do that for you. Part of Merlot's charm is actually at table. Unlike Cabernet Sauvignon, which has always that strong tannic profile, which makes it a little bit more difficult to match with food, Merlot, because of its inherent softness, can pair well with a greater range of dishes. I love Merlot with tuna, for example. I think that's a lovely match. Merlot goes well because of its inherent herbal nature with a lot of vegetarian dishes, and of course it can play very happily with salmon, like Pinot Noir can, or with a number of pastas and other dishes too. Very flexible at table. Napa Valley Merlot is, without question, probably the most signature variation of this grape in California, although you can find excellent examples in Sonoma, Santa Cruz, Carmel, Monterey. The list goes on and on and on. Anywhere where you have a nice amount of ripeness but also coolness would be a good place for Merlot. But Napa Valley is sort of where it all got started, and Freemark Abbey is a place that was very important early on in its heyday too. Back as early as the 70s, they were using Merlot more for blending than as a variety, but obviously over time have grown into it as a varietally labeled wine too. What I find in Merlot in general is pretty much a similar profile of what I would find in Cabernet Sauvignon. You're going to find the dark fruit, you're going to find the blue fruit. You'll find a little bit more red fruit here only because it's an earlier ripening grape, so you're not pushing the sugars quite as high. What is also, I think, signature to Merlot that you don't find so much in Cabernet Sauvignon is this inherent sort of mintiness or menthol or coolness to it, which both manifests itself in the nose, but also the palate, and then a softness in the structure. This wine from Freemark Abbey demonstrates all of those sort of darker fruit characters that I would expect. It's plummy, it's berry, it's blueberry, it's blue plum, and then it has this sort of nice herbal element to it. I'm getting sage leaf, I'm getting bay leaf from it, I'm getting a hint of black licorice as well too, a little bit of fennel, and a very opulent ripe nose. What I'm not getting here is a lot of oak. And again, this wine shows a real deft use of oak barrels, so it's not like a vanilla bomb or it's not like a big baking spice character. In the mouth, the wine is round, rich. It's got some grip to it. It's a serious food Merlot for sure, not one that's meant for sitting on your deck watching the clouds go by, but nevertheless not as hard as the equivalent Cabernet Sauvignon would be. If you can't find this specific Merlot, what I would do is seek out another Napa Valley variation. I would probably look for one that is 100% Merlot because it'll really showcase the varietal's characters and again its structure. But if you wanted to seek out another area, you'll be fine. Again, this is a grape variety that is going to show well in cooler climates across different regions.